but it's the ability to bring those voters with you.
It's complicated and you don't need to worry about it.
It's been very well canvassed that as a party, we don't think the way that Darlene acted was in line with our values and principles.
I really had to think about, how am I going to change things up? How am I going to get through this? Because I don't want to fail.
It is foul and personal and violent.
Job is to make sure that we're showing New Zealanders that there is an alternative to the divisive approach of this government, that you can bring people together.
I mean, I think one of the things that any government of whatever stripe has to realise that every minister has to be a climate minister now.
When you've got a country that's got a young population but they don't get involved, you might want to have a grown-up chat about that.
We don't want a situation where government dictates the local government, but you want to make sure the system is set up so that it's easy for communities to make a decision.
I'd be really interested to see if the officials that advise that a Crown Observer was necessary or should be put in place, or whether he's made that judgment call himself.
I don't think we did, and I've said this, I don't think, because it happened quite quickly last time, I don't know that we did a good enough job of bringing the public with us.
Remember, just by having Mary Walls doesn't guarantee that mana whenua are going to be represented around the table.
Suggests that whānau with a disability and those who care and support them are somehow grifters.
I did a whole bunch of updating for graphics and stuff, and I really should have done a new countdown. I might try and do a new countdown for next week because we're halfway through the year. Seems like a good time for a rebrief.
Yes.
Anyway, hi.
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
Doing good.
Excellent.
Keeping an eye on the vet jobs while you've been away.
Oh, it's all right. They've been managing to find me anyway. I've had some lovely comments from people while I've been away, especially over fabricated consent. I can't really pick my favorite. There's just so much crazy out there. So yeah, but we'll get onto that a little bit later. One of the things that I really want to do in this episode is the positive side of running for council. So we're going to do that with Hamilton City Councillor Louise Hutt a little bit later. Before that, we're actually running a poll on the YouTube page at the moment, seeing if people are considering running. I've had a chat today to a couple of election officials around the country, and they're a little concerned that the numbers are really low in some places, like the Gore ward, like the Gore ward for Gore District Council. Of the, I think, 8 or 9 people that have registered for it, 8 of them have direct hidden links to Groundswell. So they're really concerned about some of these candidates running and not having viable alternatives for people. So we're going to have a chat to Louise about that a little bit later. Before then, though, we're going to have a chat to Scout, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the removal of guidelines for trans amateur athletes that the government pulled through this week. On top of
by NZ Sport. By NZ Sport.
Yes. Yeah, or NZ Sports in New Zealand is a government subsidiary.
Yeah.
So the government's like, you have to do this. Grr. So we'll have a chat to Scout about that. Other than that, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head I need to go through with the top of the show. It's been a while.
Yeah, if we'll do it later if we've forgotten anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in that case, we'll bring Scout in, because why wouldn't we? Let me find the right buttons. They rearranged my whole screen for me. Oh, that looks like the right one. Kia ora, Scout. How are you?
Kia ora, I'm all right. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm doing okay, but I'm surprised you haven't frozen yourself to death yet down there.
Oh my gosh, it's so cold. The frost outside my house only just melted today.
Really?
Sorry?
Are you in one of the areas that's like 1 degree or like negative something?
When I went out just before, it was about 4 degrees.
Oh my God. My son moved down there about 3 weeks ago, and I'm working on the assumption he's frozen to death.
If you haven't heard from him, then that's a viable option.
I did hear from him, and it was a can I have money situation, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Not at all. So let's have a little chat about the government, because that's everybody's favorite topic. What's your take on what's happened this week?
I'm not surprised at all. We have a government that is continually choosing to hit down on marginalised populations, and the trans community has been a really big target and amongst disabled people and Māori people and anyone that doesn't meet their definition of who is worthy to be a New Zealander. So I'm not surprised by anything that's happened. I am exhausted. It would be really nice to be able to just focus on the mahi that we need to be doing. There's so much amazing stuff happening in trans health at the moment, and community support at the moment that would be so beneficial for us to be getting to focus our time on. But by continually targeting us with just change after change and attack after attack, it makes it really hard for us to prioritize and triage and work out what is important to respond to. And I mean, that's, I guess, the whole goal of a government like this one, isn't it?
It's like an onslaught. Like, you look one way and it's anti-Māori. You look another way, it's anti-trans, anti-rainbow, it's anti-poor people, it's anti-homeless people. It feels like an onslaught half the time, no matter where you're sort of looking, unless you're rich, wealthy, and sorted, and not a bottom feeder or a dropkick, by their definitions. I understand that there were also some health guidelines that were supposed to be released earlier this year around trans healthcare that the government is also still withholding. When those come together, when you see those sort of actions, what's the message that people in the trans community get from the government?
I mean, I'm an author on those guidelines. I was a part of the team that put them together. That was, we were contracted by Te Whatu Ora to be doing that mahi. So they sought us out. They tendered for the contract. We fulfilled everything within that contract. Te Whatu Ora approved it, and it was not permitted to go ahead. It was blocked by the government. They say that they are waiting for the puberty blockers review to be finalised and complete and published before they are willing to do that. It's not evidence-based, is it?
No.
It's based
evidence doesn't seem to be something this government does very well.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just relentless dis and misinformation that, a very small amount of the New Zealand population is really pushing, and the government is bending over to
it. What's the feedback that you've had from within the community about these changes?
I had a really good chat with a mate of mine just within the last couple of days. They are transmasculine, and they are an athlete, so they compete in marathons around the country, and they've always competed as male because that has been what has fit their identity the most appropriately. And they're now in this position where they're having to contact every organisation that they have ever run a marathon with and ask what their internal policies are going to be and whether or not they're going to, follow this government directive about where they're allowed to compete. And this is just like your everyday person just trying to live their life, that they're not an elite athlete. They're somebody who runs for the sake of their mental health. And they're looking at not being able to compete anymore. We all know someone who's run a marathon. And if we get to this point where trans people are not able to participate in sports at that level, at a really amateur level, that is just discrimination at its highest form.
I think I've completely frozen. My screen looks frozen. I don't know if you can still hear me or not. Blake, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll do it. That's okay. So when what you were talking earlier about, going down and disabled people like myself and, trans people and rainbow people, as Paul said, so how damaging is it that our government, 18 months into their term or even more now, is continuing to go down on so many communities? I guess.
I tell you, mate, it's one heck of a time to be disabled, Māori, queer, trans, and also really low income.
Yeah.
Just it feels like
Mm.
on a personal level, every single part of who I am and what I need to be able to live a good life and what I have a right to under the Human Rights Act to be able to live an equal life to everyone else is just being constantly targeted. I see we've lost Paul there.
Yeah,
It's
we just
relentless.
keep going. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does it make you feel when you, supposing you've heard these comments from people like Chris Bishop and other ministers saying, "Oh, we need to do this review as part of a process to make sure it's fair for all," and comments like that. How does it make you feel hearing, comments like that all the time? Because
I'm really frustrated.
Because as a disabled person, it's not good to hear it from my community all the time. So I can't imagine what it's like for you.
My background is that I work in health policy. I'm doing my Master of Health Policy at the moment. And every time I hand in another paper, there's more jobs being lost within the exact field that I'm trying to get into. But my whole thing is evidence and it's information and, rigorous research that really explains why we're trying to advocate for what we're trying to advocate for. And it feels so diminishing and dehumanizing and disempowering to be constantly having to argue that the evidence has come from a really solid place. There's a really solid background for it, and it needs to be respected and understood and enacted.
Mm-hmm. So do you expect a lot of these organisations to ignore the government directive and continue with these transgender abilities to play in their leagues, or do you expect them to be too scared and bow to the government's commands?
On one hand, I can't see why all of these individual community organisations who are arranging amateur sports would need to be bowing down to what the government is saying. But on the other hand, this opens the door to a lot of critique and criticism for choosing not to follow this directive. There could be public backlash from people who assume that because the government has said that this is what to do, that this is correct. There's a lot of people out there who think that the government must be acting with evidence, when we know for a fact that that's just not what's happening.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that they might bow to the government demands instead of having any future funding cut by the government? Do you reckon that could be a hindrance as to whether they, follow it or not?
The government has withheld and removed funding from so many different organisations. It's not a stretch to think that community sports organisations are going to experience a funding hit if they don't bow down to this. I don't want to say definitively that that's going to happen because I don't want to be convincing any community sports organisation that excluding us is the right idea. It's absolutely not. It's discriminatory and it's awful and it's got really bad implications for our well-being. But it is a really big fear.
I see that you're back for, so I'll give you.
I am. I'm sorry, my computer completely froze on me, and then it's like, no, I'm going to restart now. And I'm sitting going, well, maybe I shouldn't have had 20 million tabs open at the same time when I tried to do a live stream. Yeah, just really basic computery things more than anything. So thank you for not completely crashing everything while I was away. I appreciate it. Hey, can I have a little chat about well-being then with you, Scout? I was
Yeah,
just
sure.
having a look at the study that was done out of the University of Waikato a couple of years ago around trans identity. That's a huge research piece. That one right there, Counting Ourselves. It's an amazing piece of research. Absolutely
Gorgeous book
love
as
the
well.
making that went into that. One of the stats that pops up in there, one of the bits of information that comes up in there is around the need for social structure, social support structures in place. We know that social sport, amateur sport, is one of those social structures. And we can also see that statistically, trans people are far less likely to go out and get involved in amateur sport already. They make up less than 1% of the overall population. How much of this is a member or an element within the government making a molehill out of, or making a mountain out of a molehill?
It's one of those popular things to complain about, really, isn't it? It's been a really contentious issue for quite a long time now, this issue of trans inclusion in sports. Sorry, I still have a chest infection. Just
I know the
harking
feeling.
back to the Dunedin is freezing cold at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah, like we've been talking about this for years, and the evidence doesn't stack up. The evidence does not show that we have trans people coming in and ruining community sports for everyone else, because it's just not how it works. We know that when trans women are on estrogen, it actually lowers their strength levels and their athleticism. And we know that trans masculine people on testosterone do end up being at comparable levels to cis men without actually always obtaining the muscle and the strength to be overpowering them. Like a lot of us are still scrawny and weak despite the however many decades of testosterone we've taken, you know. Again, it's completely contrary to the evidence. One thing that did come out of Counting Ourselves, when you look at the sport and recreation section, I think, is it does show that most trans people are exercising and want to be exercising. And it asks, do you participate in organised sports? And it does show that trans people are participating in organised sports at about half the rate of cis people. So there is already a massive discrepancy there. If you think about how tiny the population is, and then how few of us are actually doing organised sports in the first place, we're not out here taking over your social netball team.
Might be lucky to have somebody in the whole social netball league.
Exactly.
I'm going to bring up a question, actually, or a comment that's come through on Facebook. This one here from Dean says, agree with the government on this. That's pretty rare. Can't say I blame them if they don't. It's really, really rare when I agree with them as well. The actual sports org should be deciding the rules, not the government. So what the government's done, just to clarify this, is tell Sport NZ that they have to take their guidelines offline and any material that relates to trans people. But those are guidelines. They were never the rules specifically for each code. And each code has their own rules in place and their own guidelines. These are essentially a resource there for amateur groups, for example, that might not have the resources to go out there and do what something like Rugby NZ has, as an example. So the government themselves have never dictated rules on this. They've just given guidelines which this government has removed. Is that accurate?
Yep. The guidelines serve as a bit of a how-to on, you know, you've got this trans person wanting to come and join whatever amateur level, community level sport you are running, and you want to know, how can I make sure that this person has a good time?
Which makes sense. Everybody should have a good time playing sport, even though it's not something I personally can say about myself.
I am the least athletic person you're going to get as someone who has an actual like diagnosed exercise intolerance caused by disability. There's no chance you're going to get me in one of these teams, but I should have the option to. If I was in a healthy body and it was medically safe for me to do so, I should have the option to do that and still be afforded the dignity to be who I am in that space.
With the rules changing, like with the guidelines being taken down, that visibility disappearing, is that something that we're seeing with this government in particular around removing visibility of trans people within our communities?
I think the act of, we've had Winston Peters saying that he wants to ban trans people from public bathrooms, for instance. That's a public space that he's talking about having us locked out of. Things like the choice to halt the publication of the gender affirming care guidelines. It means that there's 140 pages of incredible, rich, evidence-based information that's not getting out there, which means that people have less information, which means people are less likely to seek the care that they need because their doctors are less likely to have access to the resources and information that they need, on a quick basis to give them the care that they deserve. And that also serves to invisibilize.
That's a horrible word, invisibilize.
Yes, indeed.
Hard one to get out, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
I knowing what I've recorded today, hard words to get out of the sort of thing that keeps throwing me up at the moment. I don't blame you for tripping on it at all. In terms of what we can look forward for then for, say, government policies from the opposition going into the next election, are there any sort of policies around this that you think that these parties should be looking at specifically to try and encourage people to understand what's happening within the trans community around this issue, or to encourage people to get a broader understanding of what's actually going on?
I think policy is really important in this space, but so is values and ethics. And I would hope to see that the parties that do have these values and the ethos of inclusion and support and kindness, dare I say it, are going to make sure that they have really stringent policies around inclusion and around following evidence and making sure that the process of any of these changes is rigorous in a way that is protecting the community and not further serving to invisibilize the community. I said it right that time.
Well done. Well done. Any more questions, Blake?
So I have to ask this, so it's a bit more relevant. So would you be opposed to let's say a new government decided, let's try something radical and have our own transgender sports body? Was that something personally you would be in favour of, or not really?
I would not be in favour of that because that would be economically stupid. The population of trans people is far too low to warrant having a separate oversight body for trans people participating in amateur level sport. There's just not enough of us participating. It makes sense to fold it into Sports New Zealand, because why would you spend all of that money setting up an organisation to do that separately? And, the result of that would be that sports teams for trans people would potentially not have enough trans people in them to be able to compete, but they would end up forced to compete only against themselves, and that just becomes discriminatory in of itself.
Of course, I just had to ask that, otherwise he will go, "Oh, you didn't ask the question." so yeah, and I guess it would be the same for anyone who asked about having their own sport leagues as well. Same difference, right? So yeah. So
well, the way I see it, it's kind of like, because I used to do a lot of work with professional swimmers. You have a couple of dozen different leagues of people who are swimming with disabilities, because everybody has a different disability, which impacts their ability to perform, to swim differently. It would be the same with having trans people. You have a range of trans people who have a range of gender ideologies and identities and abilities and skills and everything like that. And to lump them all together just wouldn't work. And for such a small percentage of the population, it does seem like an amount of bureaucracy that would just be a waste of time and money.
Yes, I do agree. But like I'm saying, I'm just asking the questions for those people who will want them answered. So
You know what? In terms of questions for balance, it's much better than some of the media organisations have been asking this week. So
who needs
so,
them?
yeah.
Media. What do they know? All right, then I'm going to try one for balance then. The Prime Minister said about this decision, it's about consistency and safety. I'm wondering what your response is to that particular comment from our wealthy and sorted frickin' Prime Minister.
I don't see wealthy and sorted Prime Minister being somebody who is at risk of gender-based violence. But trans people, on the other hand, we are at really high risk of gender-based violence. And obviously that's a lot more than physical, you know. I think safety is a really misused word in this context, because trans people are not creating safety risks within amateur sports. You're not going to be inherently at major risk because there's a trans person in your rugby team. It's just not the way it works. The rules are the same for everyone. The boundaries and limits are the same for everyone. And also it's not based on medical science. But we do deserve to have spaces where we are safe in as trans people. And if we are constantly being questioned about anything to do with our gender identity, anything to do with our bodies, our medications, our hormone levels, etc., we are put in a position over and over again where we are vulnerable to that kind of violence. It would be incredibly disappointing to see us move further down that route. It would make things much more unsafe for trans people while having demonstrably no impact on cis people whatsoever, other than maybe their feelings.
Indeed.
But that's something you can sort out with, you know, some reflective journaling and going to therapy.
I know a number of cis people who have very, very thin skin when it comes to their feelings, and yeah, they definitely need some help with that. Maybe 2 free counselling sessions from Mike King.
Fully funded for another however bloody long.
I don't know if I trust Mike King to be my counsellor.
Who knows? Who knows?
That is a whole nother podcast segment right there that I could go on for hours about.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I'm going to bring up one comment here that's coming from Dave, which I think is really pertinent and a great way to end this conversation. As an older man, I have vivid memories of this debate, just with a different group, but with all the same arguments. Gays in sport. I don't want no gay man looking at me in the shower. It feels like a recycled argument that keeps popping up over and over every generation. How do we stop that from happening?
I think it will stop happening. We saw this happen with gay men predominantly. Trans women were also quite horrifically attacked during that same period of time. We came to a point as a society where gay men have an extraordinary amount of privilege now and are able to live very good lives. A lot of that was built up with the support of trans people. Trans people fought really hard for gay rights, and
The trans woman who
obviously would quite like. Yeah, we would now obviously quite like to see the rest of the queer community support us with our rights as well. No, we supported you, so you support us. It's fair, right? We all have an idea of fairness and equality in Aotearoa, unless we're government ministers, and then that's debatable. I don't think that things are going to stay hard for trans people forever. It is simultaneously the best time in history, other than maybe pre-colonization, to be trans, and also the hardest time, I would say. I don't think the hard times are going to last forever.
They never do.
But we have to keep going. We can't just accept these changes. We have to be really smart. we have to be really organized, and we have to keep our shit together so that we can get to the point that we need to be at.
Indeed.
Right. Perfect place to wrap things up. Have you got a website or something like that you want to send people to where they can learn more information? Or follow you online?
I don't have a personal website that I can refer you to, but Gender Minorities Aotearoa have republished all of the removed resources from the Sport New Zealand website. They've republished PDF copies that they downloaded before they were removed. So if you are looking to work out how to support a trans person in your, I don't know, social netball team, then you can go to the GMA website and check those out.
Brilliant. Scout, thank you so much for being here. It's really appreciated. I'm really hoping we didn't interrupt too much Minecraft time.
No. As you can see by her empty desk, the 6-year-old has gone to bed a little bit early tonight, so not too much interruption there at all.
That makes sense. Now, there was one other question I wanted to ask you. As a trans parent, do you get people making jokes about not being able to see you because you're obviously transparent?
I make more of those jokes myself.
Fair.
I love
the
a
art
good
of the
dad
dad joke. Love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you so much, Scout. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Right.
Brilliant. And there's some great stuff coming through in the chat on this as well. It's really cool to see that people are listening and learning. It's absolutely brilliant. Should we bring on our next guest, who is also in a freezing part of the country?
I don't know. I don't know if Louise is as freezing as down south.
She is down south. Let's bring her in.
Oh, okay.
Got Louise. How are you holding up down there?
I am. It's good. It's good. I've got a very hot drink to accompany me tonight, so it's good.
Good plan. You are in Queenstown at the moment?
I am.
Is there anywhere colder in the country right now?
I'm not certain, to be honest. I do this thing where I visit friends in Queenstown so I can go back home to Hamilton and be like, it's so warm. It's so warm.
It's surprisingly warm. People forget just how warm it gets because of the way that the area is and the lack of like ocean breezes and stuff like that. It's great.
Yeah. And they're like 100% humidity all the time.
Yeah. That's well, I just got back from Manila, so it's a little bit less than that.
Yeah, maybe.
We can all be jealous of that.
Yes. Hey, I had a little chat today to a whole bunch of election officials around the country, and they've got a concern. People aren't signing up to run for elections, and I'm willing to take credit here and say that part of that is probably my fault because I've scared a whole bunch of people, and that was some of the feedback that came through. But I wanted to have a chat to somebody who is really good at the job that they're doing, who's running again, who is really passionate about their community, about what we can do to get more people up and running for their councils this year, and what the benefits of having a good range of candidates is for this year's local body elections. We're running a poll at the moment if people have considered putting their name forward, and so far we've got 69% of people say no, which means that 31% of people say yes, they're considering it. So I guess what's the sales pitch for becoming a councillor?
Well, I have actually put my nomination in early. So I'm in, the good books, having done the paperwork currently. There are so many amazing and special and just things that make me feel really honoured to be a city councillor. It's things from like yesterday, we approved 4 intersections in Hamilton to be upgraded. And we had a report on something like seeing how many more bus stops and bus shelters had solar lighting put in them. And we've actually put in 45 more bus shelters, like upgraded them so people aren't waiting in the rain just in the last 12 months. And stuff like that to me, as someone who uses the bus, is like, I'm like, yeah, team, yeah. Like, it's all of those, sometimes big, but often really small changes that can just change your experience of your city or your town or where you live. And it's being able to have a say in that. And, these 4 intersections that we looked at, so many of them were accessibility upgrades. They were improving the curb cuts. They were making people not run across 4 lanes of traffic, you know, things that to me were like, yes, this is actually really important progress. And I think often you cannot know about the opportunity your council has to change some of this stuff. And so getting to see the opportunities as they come and know that, I like to think most of the time we make a good decision. Sometimes we make decisions I don't like, but a lot of the time we do. And, you know, that's the stuff that kind of gets me through the really hard times. Because I try not to, you know, bullshit people and say, oh yeah, it's all like wonderful and daisies and, you know, small kittens. There are really hard times, but it's just about holding really tight to those good things and those things that you're proud of.
What would be the most surprising, positive learning experience for you from this role so far?
Gosh, I think at the moment there's a really big push to get people to engage with central government, and I entirely endorse that and entirely think that that is a really useful thing that we're going through as a country. But quite often our current governing parties have stacked select committee, and so it really depends on the pre-arrangement of whether your submission is actually going to make a change. In local government, there are no prearranged deals on how something is going to go through. Your submission, if you fill out the form that says, yes, I support this, or no, I don't support it, or if you come and speak to us or you provide information in your written submission, that can actually really change what happens on the day and whether something goes through or doesn't. And I think that's probably one of the most positive things that I come out of this with, is that like democracy really happens. Like it happens, and I watch it happen and I go, oh my gosh, like this is changing as I watch it or as those submitters come through, but it's actually a really positive thing.
Is there sort of any advice that you give to people then who might be sitting on the fence, where I've seen a few sort of comments come through just about how feral it can be in the role? How do you tackle that? What sort of advice would you give to people who are like, well, that's a concern for me running?
I think that you need to go into it eyes wide open. If you pretend that it's not feral, then you're probably going to have a way worse time. For me, I was someone who became really present online right as dirty politics went down. And so I was really aware that that was the kind of political landscape that I was watching happen on Twitter at the time. And I think that if you go into it kind of understanding the games that get played, or the way that disinformation, just permeates our communities, you actually are in a bit better position to counter it and to also protect yourself. I think I had someone say to me that, oh, you must have such a thick skin. And I'm like, I don't think about it in that terms. I really just think about it in that most of the people who say really horrible stuff about me have never even met me in real life. They don't know the things that would actually hurt me. Like they don't know me well enough to know about that. But also they would attack anyone who looked like me or sounded like me or represented the communities that I represent. It's actually not about Louise. It's about whoever is trying to inhabit that space, pushing for progress or, trying to challenge the status quo. And so I think if you can actually depersonalize it and, keep in mind that you're just the vessel of the moment, it can make it easier to kind of go, okay, this is just water off a duck's back.
Oh, indeed.
Oh, frozen. No, there we go. Back
sorry.
again. My computer's already crashed once tonight and everything froze, so I'm worried it's all my fault. Everything is all my fault. Which I get told on
usually my life.
Yeah. Blake, jump on in. Ask some questions.
So, there are a lot of, as Paul mentioned at the top of the show, I don't know if you heard it, but there are a lot of empty awards and things at the moment. So we could be faced with a lot of by-elections. So how interesting could that turn out to be, or damaging, or however you want to describe it?
Yeah, it's definitely like worrying, but also I don't know. I sort of don't. I'm a little bit suspicious that sometimes, and I would, of course, not at all be speaking for myself, that local government candidates can do stuff at the last minute. So I'm hopeful that maybe there will be some last minute candidates put in their submission, but yeah, it's worrying for democracy, and it's also worrying, that the voter turnout seems to be continually getting lower and lower and lower, and really what that's doing is concentrating power into those people who do vote and do perhaps have a vested interest in voting for whatever reason. I was talking with some students at Wintec this week, and was saying to them, like, if you don't vote, you're endorsing the people who do vote and their politics. And if they think there should be a playground or a skate park, or whether they think that we should close the libraries or, insert any other thing that council does here, you need to be really careful. If there's, you're disengaging from democracy, that still has a repercussion. There's no consequence for whether you engage or don't engage.
And it's like Paul was saying earlier, like, did you say it was Gore that 8 out of 9 of them are groundswellers?
Yeah, including one of their executive who has shares in Groundswell, who was the person who signed off on their little documents as third-party electors to the government when they spent $141,000 on the campaign company to pay for Groundswell in their anti-Three Waters roadshow during the last general election. She's running for council in Gore, and she hasn't admitted anywhere online her connections to Groundswell. Anyway, this is supposed to be a positive, happy conversation that doesn't scare people into not running.
I mean, I do think that if you want to run, see if there are other people who previously ran, even if they weren't this previous term, even the term before that, and, talk to them about, how did you campaign and how did you, build name recognition? And, there's a lot of times I see new candidates say stuff and I'm like, oh, no, that's not how that works. I love your enthusiasm, but that's not quite how that works. And I think, having those mentors or people that you can talk to who have been through it, who can kind of help you navigate some of that, can be really useful if you are thinking about running.
So then how do we get people not to be scared of those other organizations that still run?
I do think it really depends on the individual. Like, for me, I was really aware going into this that, being elected is so much work. Like, the first time you get elected. I had 2019 and I had 2022 and I had the 3 years in between where I was still in many ways working to be elected in 2022. And so for me, I knew if I was going to be elected, I wasn't just going to be a one-termer, because most of the work is in being elected the first time. So I think when you consider it as a prospect, considering it as something you might do for 6 years, thinking about it as something that might take 2 elections or 3 elections for you to be successful at. So even if you lose the first time, that's all part of the plan. It's not that you failed. It's just that success might take several goes. But I think also really it comes down to our communities. Our communities need to make it safer for us to stand. And, I have really wonderful people who help me with my comment section. And I was having a nap the other day and I got this really yuck comment. And my partner messaged me when I woke up and was like, oh, I already hid that for you. You're welcome. So that wasn't the first thing you saw when you woke up from your nap. And I was like, thank you. But it also requires, the wider community to say, when they see behavior, to be like, please don't. Don't be a misogynist. Don't be a racist. Think this stuff through, because what you allow to go unchallenged, or what you allow to be the standard of behaviour of your councillors, is ultimately what you end up getting.
So what kind of policies would you like people to come in with that might encourage people to vote for them? I know that's a long-winded question, but I guess that's a good one.
I think it does depend a lot on like your community and what they need to see more of. You know, for us in Hamilton, there's lots of stuff that I started this term that I want to make sure is finished, or to see some real structural changes happen at council in terms of how we view climate change. So for me, you know, I'm also a voter. I'm also going to be voting for someone. Well, 6 of them. You know, I'm thinking about, well, are you someone who literally believes that climate change is real? like it's a low bar, but like, would you be helping me in making sure that climate change is a really critical piece of decision making when we make any decision? Are you someone who is going to continue to kick the can down the road in the ways that we've seen? You know, it's sort of a weird position we find ourselves in sometimes when people are talking about like only the financials. And I think most people either don't necessarily have a great understanding of how council finance mechanics work in the first place, because we have such poor civics education, but also it can be really unsexy as a topic. But for me, I talk about, you know, I would like to see us pay down some of our debt, not because I think debt is inherently bad. In fact, it's a great metric for spreading, you know, the cost of something over the generation that uses it. But if we were to have a catastrophic climate event, say one of our bridges got wiped out, or say our drinking water plant was knocked out of action, at the moment we have such little debt headroom, we can't take on much more debt than what we already have. We'd have to go, you know, crawling on our hands and knees to the government and to this government. And the last time the national government had to bail out a city that had a catastrophic event did not go very well for that city. And so for me, it's not about being anti-debt or anti the right debt. It's simply, I'd like us to be more resilient, so that we could do stuff and we could make those decisions quickly. So I think sometimes the policies you want to see from people, there is nuance to it. Like, I'm not going out there and being like, we need lower debt just for the sake of it. I'm like, well, actually, this, to me, it's about climate action.
What are you thinking, Paul?
Many things, like food needs to be ordered for dinner at some stage. But in terms of this, one of the things I love seeing come out of the Hamilton campaigns in particular is a raft of candidates who sit there and screaming, we need smarter decisions, we need less nice to haves, we need more efficiencies, without giving any sort of criteria or explanation as to what that actually means. How do you go about countering that kind of, it's not so much misinformation, it's understandable where their stance is coming from, but it's broad and it has no real added value beyond saying, I don't like this thing. How do you as a candidate and as a councillor counter that kind of thing? Get the right information out about policy, procedure, and how it all works.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time it is just me being like, cool, that would be nice, but this is how it actually works, you know? Just like literally sharing the correct information when it is disinformation. And, you know, it has been really horrifying to see how much of it is currently being shared. And, you know, I have some empathy because the machine of council is not easy to navigate yourself. If you're trying to extract information, I don't even know if Lagoimas or local government OIAs are really that helpful either in terms of extracting information. You really need a councillor to say to you, you know, you want to find information from here, you know, and the context for that was in the briefing a month earlier, and that points to, you know, this stuff over here. But I think it's also about challenging people to be specific, you know, like, are you actually going to be accountable to the whole community? Because ultimately, you're not just accountable to the people who voted for you. You're accountable to 100% of the city. And some people like cycle lanes, believe it or not. Some people like the library. Some people, like the dog park, or, I don't have a dog, but I do think dogs should go to the dog park, and have a good time. And I mean, ultimately, when you're in the job, you are lobbied by all sorts of people for all sorts of things, and people will, hate one decision and love the next. And ultimately, it's about a collective balance. It's not about like the things that I personally would use or personally think are useful or good for my particular lifestyle, because that's not really fair. And I think, it really is about, can you take a strategic lens? And so much of the perspective I used to have was what I would have liked in my city personally. Whereas now I have to think about, everyone in the community, but also all the people who are not here yet, And I think, transport is such a great example of that. Yep, everyone drives currently because the transport system is set up to support drivers and to encourage driving, But I also think that we shouldn't have to put, I think it was some data I saw was like 20% of your household bills were going towards transport. And I was like, yeah, I think you should have other options. I think you should be able to take the bus or to cycle or to walk. And, you should have that choice. And so sometimes, a good example of, tying someone down on a decision or a policy is like, well, do you think people should have choices? Or do you think they should just do the one thing that you do? Because you've got to be able to balance that.
Now, around every political organisation, there's a range of voices with a range of opinions. Some are very measured, some are completely idiotic. How do you go about having those conversations with people around that table and about reaching out or coming to agreements or working with people who you might not necessarily agree with on a range of things?
I think for me, I've been really frustrated, would be the way of putting it nicely, with councillors who simply don't show up. Didn't show up to a briefing, and the ones in the room didn't say anything. We went to make a decision about a crossing outside of a mosque that was, the mosque had been asking for it for 6 years. In the room when we're making the decision, all of a sudden, all these problems appear, in the moment we were supposed to be making this decision, from councillors who didn't show up to the briefing, didn't send in questions ahead of the report goes out 7 days in advance. And yet in the moment, there was all this political, hoorah about all of these problems, and we had to send it back, and then we had to have another briefing. And there's been times where I've stopped briefings and I've said to staff, I'm so sorry. This is unacceptable for you to be talking to 5 out of 15 of us. And I'm going to ask you politely to stop this briefing until we can call other councillors and bring them into this meeting, because how can you possibly be making good decisions? And interestingly, after posting about this publicly several times, our decisions we made yesterday at the transport meeting went really smoothly because people had shown up to the briefing and actually engaged in it and gone, oh, okay, well, yeah, we're partially closing a road or the entry exit onto a road. But the people who lived there really supported it. We managed to find a compromise that, most people were really okay with and happy to go forward with. So there isn't this sort of politicking for politicking's sake. We as a collective could really see that the people that's directly affected it really wanted it. And that's the irony, is especially in transport, you see people be like, oh, well, I hate these things on these main roads, but the amount of times that we're getting requests for quiet cul-de-sacs to have speed bumps or etc. is actually really common. People really want them for their own streets. And so I think ultimately when you're working across a political spectrum, I have respect for people who show up, who do the reading, who ask good questions, and who ultimately put the well-being of the community and the decision that you're making above their political career and creating political noise for the sake of it. And that's ultimately I'm like, even if we disagree, and even if we have a really robust debate, you know, like, are you doing it because you believe that's actually what the community wants, or are you doing it because you need to stay relevant?
I mean, it is an election year, so some of them will be showing up because it is an election year.
Hey, but it was a unanimous decision to upgrade these 4 intersections. Yeah.
That is brilliant.
Including
Final question
2
for you,
raised safety tables.
That's cool. Final question for you. This last election, we saw some demographic changes in the representation makeup around the country for local body elections. It was the first time that we saw 20% of elected members identify as Māori, and it was the youngest overall council age that we've seen in a generation, still over 40, but still the youngest that we've seen in a generation. How important is it to have people who are in those demographics getting out there and making sure their voices are heard?
Yeah, I mean, massively important. I am in this interesting position where I'm the youngest person on Hamilton City Council at 32, but I also hold the older person's portfolio for Hamilton City Council. And that, you know, like, intergenerational connection is one of the things that I've really, really enjoyed about council and I think that you need young people to feel like there's people that will represent them, but you also, you know, I think it can be really valuable for older people to feel that people my age are participating in democracy. So it's not just, it is about young people being represented by young people, but I also think there's a lot of older people who feel really heartened by people under the age of 40, you know, getting more involved and stepping into those positions, because I know there are some people who do want to tap out, but don't want to leave that space to people who don't represent their values, you know.
It must be one of the few jobs out there that has this really weird sense of ownership around it. Like, you're put in there by the whims of the voters, no matter which voters it is that you're dealing with. And I've seen it for years. This person's standing down, so there's a vacancy. But it's not like there's always vacancies every election. That's how elections work. Have you come across a kind of, it's almost like a, oh my God, the words completely slipped my brain at the moment. Cognitive dissonance with some people, with some of the people around the table, not naming names here, but with some of the people around the table going, well, this is my seat, and therefore if that person's leaving, who's going to fill the spot of my friend or whatever? Have you come across that with elected members before?
I'm not sure if anyone said it quite that succinctly. But I was thinking about this actually the other day when I was looking at the City Council's website for the elections, and it says, you know, 6 vacancies, 2 vacancy, 1 vacancy. And I thought, yeah, like, it's not a given. It's not a right that you have that you were elected and so shall be re-elected. You know, you have to earn it back. And, you know, a lot of the work I've done in prepping for my re-election campaign is going, if you voted for me, if you voted for someone who sold fuck the status quo t-shirts and ones that said climate action now on them, you know, what would you have expected me to have done? And am I accountable to the person that I was when I wasn't elected versus now? And so much of my work has been around being like, well, here's all the things that we achieved. And it was a really momentous list. I sent it to a friend on Instagram, and Instagram was like, this message is too long. I had to split it into like 5 parts. And I colored it way more further for my website. But, you know, I actually sat back and was like, shit, yeah, like, I think I would vote for me again. You know, and I feel like if you cared about those things that you cared about 3 years ago, I'd hope that you were stoked that, you know, I'd done some things. But I don't know about how other people feel. It's, you know, I've been pleased to see more people talk about what they have achieved as city councillors, because I don't think we talk about that enough. I think the mechanics of city council are really well hidden, and unless you're being really deliberate about showing that, and you know, I write my little posts about today at city council we made this decision, and there was this. You know, I think unless you're being really deliberate about showing some of those inner workings, it can be really easy to not know what your city councillors have achieved.
It was actually one of the things that I loved about the Philippines is everywhere you drive, there'll be roadworks or construction crews and stuff like that. And there's a big billboard out front that says, your taxes are paying for this. I think it's such a really cool, simple way of just showing the population what their money goes to sometimes because they don't see it. And councils are one of those organizations that, especially if you live in an urban area, you are dealing with something your council does every day. Roads, footpaths, parks, getting to school, that kind of stuff, water supply, all of that. And yet we just can't get the numbers up for people getting out there and getting engaged when we ask them to, so that they can access all the services and have a say on it. I will make this the final question so that we can get into the news and wrap everything up before BHN comes along at 9 and takes all our viewers. What do people need to do if they want to nominate and run?
Oh my gosh. So it is a little bit of a rigmarole, but it's okay. You've still got a week, so it's doable.
Yep.
You need you need 150 words about why someone should vote for you, and that goes in the candidate booklet. And you need a nice little picture to go with it. Make sure you spell check it. That's my biggest worry every time. You need $200, or at least that's what it costs in Hamilton. I assume it costs the same elsewhere.
It's set nationwide at the same rate.
$200 per ward that you're running in. So if you're running for the mayoralty and a ward, it'll cost you $400. If you want to run for a third ward, I don't know why, it would be another $200. You need 2 nominators from the ward you're standing in, and they need to be on the electoral roll for that ward. So say, like, I'm running in a general ward, and I have lots of friends on the Māori roll, but they can't be my nominator because they're on the Māori roll and not the general roll, even though they live in the ward. And then it's mostly just like ticking a bunch of boxes, finding your passport or your citizenship certificate and showing them that. But yeah, that is actually the bare minimum of like being on the ballot.
So it's not that hard. It's getting the paperwork together, but it's not an overly complex process.
No. And when someone nominates you, they literally just sign a form. It's not like, I think Louise is the best person I've ever met. They just write their name and sign it.
It's actually one of the things I've noticed looking at nationwide nominations and how different councils work for this election. In the North Island, the nominators, you basically like, okay, that's cool, that's them, they're out of the way. In the South Island, particularly the top of the South Island area, there's a lot of, these are the awesome people who nominated me and I want to thank them from the candidates. And I think it's actually kind of cool, but also a little bit, I can understand why people might be a bit wary if they don't want that put out there. But I think it's fantastic to see that there's these regional differences about how people celebrate the ones that are going out and nominating them. I like that. I think that's brilliant, personally.
I think it also depends on, like, do you know a cool, fun person that would be in a Facebook post? I saw a really good one where they were both like this, like, I was like, that's good.
Yeah.
I love that.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Nominations close midday, August 1st. So people need to get their details into the area or the council that they want to run in as soon as possible. And if good people are running, I'm sure we can organize some chats with them on here and other channels and promote a few people out there. I need to have a chat to you about that, actually, Lou, and I'll do that on air because I'm working on something to get good candidates onto a different show. But yeah,
cool.
We'll roll with that later.
So you'll invite me to that show for the good candidates as well?
Yeah, of course. Definitely. The show that I'm doing for the bad candidates is the one that's going to go viral. I know that already. But the show for the good candidates, I really want people to watch as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've ultimately got to give people alternatives. And that's really what it comes down to. If, I was not my first choice. Like, for a candidate, I asked all of my friends and they said no. So I said, okay. So really, ultimately, if you want things to change, you've got to do something. And even if it sucks a bit at times, it's okay.
Now, also for the people of Hamilton, I will be in town on Tuesday night. I'm doing a presentation at Seed Waikato from, I think it's 6 till 8. Check out I think it's the Waikato local Facebook page. They've put an announcement out if you want to come along to it. They need people to RSVP so they can organize catering. I think they're having Sal's Pizza. I'm looking forward to it. So come on down and I'll have a chat to people there about. I've even got working examples of people from within the Waikato they really should be concerned about. And one that they don't need to be concerned about anymore because she decided not to run again, which is not a bad thing.
That sounds good.
Yes. On that note, thank you very much, Lou. Stay nice and warm down there, and we will catch you when you get back.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Bye-bye.
All right, see ya. Yeah, so for people in the Waipa, Sally Whitaker, who's on the Te Awamutu Kihi local board or community board, who is insane. Like there is not a single conspiracy that she hasn't fallen for. That's on her personal Facebook page. She's decided not to run again. But the anti-fluoride troll Kane Titchener has decided to run again, in case anybody wants to stand in the Kakapuka ward down there against him.
I hope you're going to stay. Just a thing. I hope you're going to stay overnight this time.
In Hamilton?
Yes.
I may be forced to. The weather's not looking too hot, but we'll see. We will see.
Otherwise, you'll be getting back. Otherwise, you'll be getting back at 1 a.m. again.
Well, yeah, that all comes down to roadworks, really, which I don't want to deal with, but we will see. I'll worry about that on Tuesday or over the weekend. Yeah, it'd be good to catch up actually with some whānau that I've got down there at the moment that came back with me from Aussie. So plenty of time. Should we jump into the news?
We shall.
Oh, shit. That reminds me, I need to re-upload it because the computer restarted. So this ought to be fun. Video file. Damn your technology.
Do you need me to keep talking?
Nah, it'll take like 2 seconds. Open. All right, news time. Week's the news. Massive subtractions for the tertiary education sector. You better believe we're stuck with high dairy prices. Is Stephen Joyce's consultant fee income about to end? And the Foreign Affairs Minister spooked by rainbows. All that and more in this week's The News. Hello there, kia ora, I'm Paul and I'm back. Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith, seen here wondering if you're going to eat that last chip, has come out saying that Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour's comments calling people who choose to enrol on election day dropkicks was unhelpful after the government this week announced proposed changes to the way elections are run, which included the removal of same-day enrolment and an inability to change rolls once advance voting begins, a move which some experts claim could disenfranchise up to 130,000 voters. Seymour's comments came on the tiles on Thursday after the announcement had been made, where he described people who enrol on the day as lazy dropkicks several times. Said Goldsmith, these comments are unhelpful. In National, we prefer to call these people probably left voters. It means the same thing to us, but, sounds more civilised. Deputy Prime Minister and Associate Education Minister David Seymour, seen here with the reason he shouldn't be in charge of portfolios involving young children, this week announced plans to scrap pay equity for newly qualified ECE teachers in a move that will cost teachers $22 million over the next 2 years and increase profits for private sector providers. Said Seymour, they were looking for ways to make the sector more viable so parents could access childcare, and the best way to do that was clearly drive more ECE teachers offshore to look for work where they're actually valued. A cabinet paper has revealed that upcoming changes to tertiary education, especially at polytechs, will cost 1,000 jobs and see the removal of 500 courses and the closure of 30 training sites to become what Tertiary Education Minister Penny Simmons, seen here throwing down at a rival gang, called economically viable. Enough to help us pay for those landlord tax breaks. She went on to say, by cutting back on training opportunities, removing access to education, we've ensured future generations of skilled workers and creative Kiwis know they'll be appreciated. In Australia, the Post-Primary Teachers Union this week refused one of the lowest ever pay offers given to the union of just 1% increases over every year for the next 3 years, which also came with plans to increase the days outside of term that schools can require teachers to come to work from 10 to 20. Public Service Commissioner Sir Brian Roche, seen here wondering if there was toilet paper with less than a single ply he could force public servants to use to save costs, said the offer was designed to recognise the contribution teachers make. while ensuring tax cuts for landlords were still affordable, going on to say, clearly we understand the need to educate our young people and the hard work that goes into it, but we also realise that an educated population is one we don't really think is good for the future of the country. It's a very fine balance to settle on a below the rate of inflation pay offer that reflects that. Finance Minister Nicola Willis, seen here showing the only butter she's really concerned with is the kind used to butter up her boss, this week sat down with Fonterra CEO Miles Hurrell to discuss the price of butter in a meeting which she described as constructive and engaging, and everyone else described as a clear PR stunt from a former Fonterra lobbyist who clearly understands how the market works and wants to look like she's doing something to help with the cost of living crisis while doing nothing at all. As a result of the meeting, nothing changed. Butter, which is a key ingredient in a huge range of products and therefore driving up significant price increases in a range of areas, is still the cost of a house deposit. But for one glorious moment, Fonterra shareholders got maximum returns. So that's really what's important here. Papers from the nicotine lobby this week revealed that they specifically targeted what they described as a quote-unquote very industry-friendly Winston Peters before the last election, which has led to a range of changes in anti-smoking and vaping legislation seen by experts as steps backwards in the goal to become a smoke-free nation. Said one paper, who would have thought that the old man who rambles and dribbles every time someone says the word Aotearoa, who courted voters clearly easily persuaded by disinformation and hate, that he would be the one susceptible to our suggestions. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, seen here wondering why the press keeps asking him questions, this week lost his cool over questions about the failure of the National Party's flagship childcare cost policy, which was revealed to have only been fully accessed by 153 families instead of the 21,000 they said would be eligible. In response to questioning, he said, "I'm not taking a lecture from frickin' Chris Hipkins or the Labour Party." To which the Labour Party responded, "You fired 1,000 tertiary education staff and cancelled 500 courses. You'll struggle to take a lecture from anyone with more expertise than you." Finance Minister Nicola Willis, wondering what the giant writing on the wall is that she's seeing, this week has said that she's not listening to the whining of local government about issues around rates rises, claiming they need to tighten their belts and stop focusing on wasteful spending. Look, they just need to do what we did. Slash budgets, fire thousands, pretend we know what we're doing when we make a decision like cancelling the ferries or borrowing for tax cuts, drive up inflation, depress wage growth and drive people out of the country. Then they can come to us and talk about fiscal responsibility and community. Minister for Health Simeon Brown and the Prime Minister, seen here with the face they make when medical professionals call for politicians to forego private medical coverage and work with the systems they've burnt to the ground like regular New Zealanders, this week announced the creation of a third medical school to go ahead at the University of Waikato, albeit with a much reduced budget to what was proposed during the election, or the election before that, or the two before that, because Waikato University has been campaigning for this for a long time and paid Stephen Joyce about $1 million to help them. In the Waikato, the news has been well received since they're the ones who have had to lose courses, reduce resources for the whole departments and deal with campus changes made as part of the university's plan to get this up and running, while in other parts of the country the news has been less well received. Said Brown, "We're moving at a lightning pace to fix the medical shortage and expect to see results from this change in a sprightly 10 to 12 years. The coalition this week announced $6 billion worth of infrastructure projects, most of which were previously mothballed projects, some dating back several terms. After driving a number of construction and infrastructure workers overseas through a lack of projects thanks to large-scale cutbacks and cancellations, the Prime Minister said it was important to start work now to get people into jobs before Christmas. Of that $6 billion, $4 billion is to go on roading projects, much like the Great Depression upgrade of the 1930s to the nation's roading network, which helped stave off destitution for many. This is seen as a way for the National Party to once again reconfirm its commitment to loving roads. The government has this week announced plans to redesign the passport again to have the words New Zealand put above the word Aotearoa in a move seen by many critics as yet another step towards trying to minimise the official language of the country. Said Minister of Internal Affairs Brooke Van Velden, seen here watching you slip on the floor without a safety sign, "Look, this is another great example of something those extreme leftists love to shove in our face in Facebook comment sections when the leader of New Zealand First has a meltdown in the House. So clearly we had to waste taxpayers' money fixing that and not dealing with, real issues." Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters, seen here spotting a rainbow, personally stepped into this year to stop New Zealand's diplomatic posts from around the world from posting about Pride Month on social media accounts, according to new documents released to the spin-off under OIA. While the actual direct messages were redacted, it's clear within the documents that Peters himself took issue with Aotearoa New Zealand embassies and diplomatic stations being involved in the building of soft power that these posts provide internationally. Said a spokesperson for Peters, who voted against decriminalisation of gay sex and against same-sex marriage, what on earth would make anyone think the minister's personal views on this were somehow impacting the decision? That doesn't sound like the sort of response we'd expect from a minister who cries about words like Aotearoa being used and demands bathroom bills to identify trans people. And finally, eyebrows were raised last weekend when the iconic Hollywood Avondale Cinema ran a CGI pre-show film starring the digital likeness of Russell Crowe, based on a ChatGPT script that includes racist tropes about Māori and Asian populations, belittles young people on TikTok, and caused patrons to wonder if their popcorn was laced with psychoactive substances. Owner of the Hollywood, Matt Timpson, apologised for her offence, acknowledging the effort to create an ironic public service announcement missed the mark, while Minister for Arts, Paul Goldsmith, said, "I don't see it as a problem. I think they pretty much nailed everything about the country in the way that we see it as a party anyway." And that's this week's The News. Thanks again for watching. Make sure you look after yourself, and if you haven't already, get registered to vote because the local body elections are coming up really fast, and if you're not registered by August the 1st, they might not be able to send you your voting forms to the right place. Anyway, live long, prosper, be one with the force, and we'll catch you guys all next week. Yeah, that was the news.
Yes. So, yes, very interesting week from Mr. Peters once again.
Oh my God. Honestly, he sounds like he is losing his marbles. It's just, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So the news is available now for paid subscribers on YouTube if you want to rewatch it. I don't know why you'd want to rewatch it. It's kind of depressing, but it's there if you want to. And it will be made available for everybody else tomorrow morning on all platforms. I can't think of anything else I need to get done tonight. I think it's a good time to wrap up the show.
I'm just gonna say that for people that were asking me where all my content is gone, don't worry, it is gonna come back. I'm just working on something really important to do with total mobility people. So yeah, that's taken up my time, which I can't speak too much more about right now.
So many hours in the day, not enough time to get everything done. If people are really interested in running for local body elections, which I thoroughly recommend you do look into it if you are considering it, or if you know other people who might be keen on it, check out your local council website. There's a whole bunch of information on each council website on how to do that. Other than that, if you want to check out other stuff that might scare you about local body elections, you can check out my website, which will scare you. But there's a whole bunch of fact-checking stuff on there, which is also kind of handy if you're looking at different ways to find out how to vote for people. All right, I think that's it. I'm done.
Yes, I am done too. So we'll see you next episode. And until then,
Yes.
We'll see you
Until
on
next
the next
time.
one.
Absolutely. Catch us later. I better press the right button now. Give me 2 ticks. Everything like that change. It's so weird.